Bruce Lee was ridiculed. You're not a real fighter by Frazier. His rebuttal left Joe without a. Bruce Lee was ridiculed. You're not a real fighter by Frazier. His rebuttal left Joe without a word. The air in the Hong Kong gym was thick with tension, the scent of sweat and leather hanging heavy in the humid evening. Bruce Lee wiped his brow with the back of his hand, his dark eyes fixed on the towering figure of Joe Frazier, who stood with his arms crossed, a smirk twisting his lips. You talk big for a guy who's never stepped in a real ring, Frazier rumbled, his voice a low growl. All that flashy kung fu crap? That's not fighting. That's dancing. The words stung, not because they were true, but because Bruce had heard them before. From skeptics, from traditionalists, even from fellow martial artists who dismissed his philosophy as nothing more than theatrics. But coming from Frazier, a man who had bled in the squared circle, who had stood toe-to-toe with Ali himself, it cut deeper. Bruce exhaled slowly, his fingers flexing at his sides. He had come to this gym not to prove himself, but to learn. To bridge the gap between East and West, between the art of combat and the science of it. But now, with Frazier's challenge hanging in the air, he knew there was only one way to settle this. Joe, Bruce said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of steel, you think fighting is just about brute force. About taking a punch and giving one back. But real fighting, real combat, is about efficiency. About using what works, not what's comfortable. Frazier scoffed. Efficiency? You sound like a damn engineer, not a fighter. Bruce didn't flinch. Then let me show you. Before Frazier could react, Bruce moved. Not with the wide, telegraphed swings of a boxer, but with the precision of a surgeon. His lead hand snapped out, a Jeet Kune Do intercepting jab, just as Frazier's guard instinctively rose. The strike landed clean, a sharp crack against Frazier's jaw, sending a jolt through his skull. Frazier staggered, more from surprise than pain. His eyes widened, then narrowed. Lucky shot. Bruce didn't smile. Again. This time, Frazier came in hard, throwing a looping right hook. Bruce slipped inside the arc, his body twisting like a reed in the wind, and drove a short, devastating uppercut into Frazier's ribs. The air left Joe's lungs in a rush, his knees buckling for the briefest moment. The gym fell silent. Even the distant thud of heavy bags seemed to pause. Frazier straightened, his breath ragged. He wiped his mouth, studying Bruce with newfound respect. All right, he admitted, his voice rough. Maybe there's more to this kung fu shit than I thought. Bruce shook his head. It's not about kung fu. It's about fighting. The art is just the tool. The mind is the weapon. Frazier extended a hand. Bruce took it, their grips firm, mutual understanding passing between them. As the two men parted ways, Frazier to his corner, Bruce to the mirror where he began his cool-down, neither spoke. But the unspoken truth hung in the air, the world had just witnessed something rare. A lesson in humility. And a masterclass in what it truly meant to be a fighter. Capítulo final, o peso de luta. Os dias seguintes foram estranhamente calmos. Bruce mantive sua rotina, treinos ao amanhecer, meditação ao entardecer, alas particulares para alunos que buscavam mais do que técnica, mas disciplina. Mas algo havia mudado. Não seus movimentos, não sua postura, mas na maneira como os outros o olhavam. Frazier, por sua vez, sumiu do ginásio. Alguns diziam que ele havia voltado para o circuito profissional, outros que estava se recuperando de uma lesão não declarada. Bruce não perguntou. Sabia que algumas lutas não terminavam com aperto de mãos. Then, on a humid Friday afternoon, the gym door opened with a bang. 3 men entered, dressed in dark suits, faces impassive. The oldest, with gray hair and a scar above his eyebrow, stopped in the center of the room and observed the environment as if evaluating a battlefield. Bruce, in the middle of kicking the sandbag, stopped. He recognized the man. Victor Kane. A name that circulated behind the scenes of clandestine fights, a promoter who turned blood into money. And, according to rumors, a man who wouldn't take no for an answer. Lee. Kane's voice was soft, almost courteous. I heard you have a rare talent. Something that is not taught in gyms. Bruce didn't move. I knew what was coming next. I have an event in Macau in 2 weeks. A closed tournament, by invitation only. Enough money to buy this place 10 times over. And an opponent who will make Frazier look like a beginner. The other 2 men positioned themselves near the exit, arms crossed. They were not fighters. They were security. Or something worse. Bruce wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. I'm not interested. Kane smiled, as if expecting exactly that answer. Everyone is interested. The issue is the price. He took an envelope from his inside jacket pocket and placed it on a bench. Think about it. But don't delay. The invitation expires at midnight. The men left as silently as they entered. The envelope sat there, untouched. That night, Bruce couldn't sleep. He sat on the floor of the small apartment above the gym, staring at the envelope as if it were a bomb. Inside, photos of fighters he recognized, some missing, others with careers destroyed. And a contract with a clause in fine print: participant waives any legal rights in the event of permanent injury or death. He knew what Kane stood for. It wasn't just a tournament. It was a man-grinding machine. And he had seen enough to understand that once inside, there was no way out. But there was something else. A voice he tried to ignore. You're not a boy anymore, Bruce. You can't run away forever. 2 days later, he was in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, surrounded by men with blank stares and scarred bodies. Kane was there, smiling as if he had already won. I knew you would come, he said, extending his hand. Bruce didn't squeeze her. I'm only going to fight once. And I'm not going to kill anyone. Kane laughed. Rules are for losers. But everything is fine. Let's see if you maintain this stance after the first round. The ring was improvised, surrounded by rusty bars. The spectators, men in expensive suits and women in jewelry worth more than a fighter's life, applauded as if they were at a spectacle. The first opponent was a Russian, muscles so dense they looked like they were carved from stone. There were no rounds, there was no judge. Just the gong and the blood. Bruce fought like he had never fought before. Not because of pride, not because of money, but because he knew that if he hesitated, he would die. The Russian was strong but slow. Bruce used it. He dodged, counterattacked, aimed at the joints, at the pressure points. When the man fell to his knees, panting, Bruce stopped. It's over, he said, breathlessly. The audience booed. Kane frowned. This isn't a game, Lee. Kill him or fight the next one. Bruce looked at the Russian, who spat out blood and shook his head, as if to say, don't do this to me. No. Kane sighed. All good. He signaled to the men in the shadows. Bring the other one. The other was a legend. A man named Darius Voss, a former MMA champion, expelled from all organizations for breaking an opponent's arm in a fight that was supposed to be for points only. He entered the ring with a sharp-toothed smile, as if he already knew the end of the story. I hear you like to joke, Voss said, rolling his shoulders. Let's see if you still think it's funny when I pull your teeth out. Bruce didn't respond. I knew words wouldn't do any good. The fight was brutal. Voss was fast, precise, relentless. Each blow seemed calculated to cause maximum pain. Bruce blocked what he could, but soon he was on the ground, tasting copper in his mouth. Then something changed. It wasn't technical. It wasn't strength. It was anger. Not blind rage, but that born of understanding, that men like Kane and Voss didn't see fighters as human beings, but as products. And he was tired of being a product. Bruce stood up. Voss laughed. Finally woke up. The next blow was different. It wasn't a punch, it wasn't a kick. It was a move, a spin, a deflection, a counterattack that ended with Voss's knee bent in the wrong direction. The crack echoed throughout the warehouse. The audience was silent. Voss screamed, falling to the ground, clutching his leg. Bruce didn't stop. He advanced, immobilized the man's arm and applied a joint lock until he heard the shoulder dislocate. "Enough," he said, panting. Kane wasn't smiling anymore. "You broke the rules." "No," Bruce replied, standing up. "I finished them." Kane's men advanced, but something stopped them. Outside, the sound of sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the dirty windows. Kane swore. "This isn't over, Lee." Bruce didn't look back as he left. "I knew it wasn't an empty threat." Men like Kane didn't forget. A week later, the gym was closed for renovations. Bruce was sitting in his office, looking at a stack of documents, ownership transfers, new contracts, a list of students he didn't recognize. "They'll be back," said a voice behind him. Bruce didn't need to turn around to know it was Frazier. "I know. And will you be ready?" Bruce closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of all the fighters he had seen fall, of all those who had been used and discarded. He thought of himself, years ago, when he believed that the fight was just about winning. "No," he said finally. "But I'll be prepared for something else." Frazier frowned. "What?" Bruce took a key out of his pocket and threw it on the table. "To teach." The new gym opened 3 months later. It wasn't luxurious, it didn't have sponsors, but it had something that the others didn't have, a sign at the entrance, simple and direct. "Here, you learn to fight. But first, you learn not to have to." Bruce was in the center of the room, observing the new students, some young, others not so much, all with the same expression of someone carrying more than tense muscles. He took a deep breath. "Today," he said, "let's start with the basics." And, for the first time in a long time, he smiled. The weight of lessons. The first few months were controlled chaos. Bruce didn't expect it to be easy, but the students' resistance went beyond physical exhaustion. There were those who arrived with their fists closed, ready to break anyone who looked the other way. Others came with their shoulders hunched, as if they were carrying the world on their shoulders. And some, the most dangerous, were those who smiled too much, as if violence were a game. "You're not here to be an animal," Bruce said to a 17-year-old boy named Rico, who had just thrown a punch so hard that it cracked the sandbag. "You're here to learn when not to hit." Rico spat on the ground. "I already know when not to hit. That's when the other guy is bigger." Bruce didn't respond. He just pointed to the mirror on the wall. "Look at you. Look at your reflection. This guy over there, is he bigger than you?" Rico hesitated, then nodded. "So why do you think you need to be stronger than everyone?" The boy didn't know how to respond. Nobody had ever asked that question. The ghost of the past. Frazier showed up one afternoon, leaning against the gym door, watching the students train. Bruce saw him, but didn't interrupt the class. Only when the last student left did he approach. "Did you come to see if I broke my face again?" he asked, wiping the sweat from his face with a towel. Frazier shook his head. "I came to see if you were really serious." "About what?" "About teaching people not to fight." Bruce threw the towel over his shoulder. "And what do you think?" Frazier looked around, at the peeling walls, at the patched sandbags, at the sign at the entrance. "I think you're trying to fix a world that doesn't want to be fixed." "It's not the world I want to fix," Bruce said. "It's them." Frazier did not respond. He just took an envelope out of his pocket and placed it on the table. "What is that?" "An invitation. Or a warning. The circuit people didn't like your board." Bruce opened the envelope. Inside was a photo of him, young, in the ring, with a bloody face and a broken-toothed smile. On the back, a sentence scrawled, "Some lessons we don't forget." He crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. They can come. The proof. They came. Not all at once, not with an army. They came little by little, like shadows. First, a former student of Bruce's, a wrestler named Darnell, showed up at the gym with a black eye and a warning, "They're asking for you." Then, one of the sandbags was torn open, with the words "Still like teaching," painted with red spray. Finally, one night, when Bruce was alone closing up the place, the door opened. 3 men entered. One of them was an old acquaintance, Vic the Hammer Malone, a fighter Bruce had defeated years ago in a dirty fight, the kind where the judges looked the other way. Vic still had the scar on his eyebrow, a cut that Bruce had opened with a precise punch. "I heard you became a teacher," Vic said, smiling. "How cute." Bruce didn't move. "What do you want?" "I want to see if the great Bruce Carter still knows how to fight. Or if you just know how to teach." The other 2 men laughed. Bruce looked at them, then at Vic. "I'm not going to fight you." Vic took a step forward. "Then you will get beaten." Bruce sighed. "That's not how it works." Vic didn't wait. He came forward, a broad, lazy punch, the kind Bruce would have easily dodged years ago. But now he didn't dodge. Instead, he grabbed Vic's wrist in the air, spun him around, and threw him against the wall. The impact caused the plaster to crack. The other 2 advanced. Bruce blocked the first punch, but the second hit him in the stomach. He coughed but didn't back down. Instead, he grabbed his attacker's arm and twisted it until he heard a snap. The man screamed and fell to his knees. Vic stood up, his face red with anger. "You son of a bitch." Bruce stopped him with a kick to the ribs. Vic fell again, groaning. "I said I wasn't going to fight," Bruce said, panting. "But I won't let you hit me either." The 3 men looked at each other. One of them helped Vic to his feet. "It doesn't end here." "It ends, yes," said Bruce. "Because if you come back, I'm going to call the police. And if you hurt one of my students, I will come after you. Not as a fighter. Like a man who has nothing left to lose." They left, limping. Bruce locked the door and leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. I knew it wasn't over. But he also knew he had just taught his most important lesson. The last round. The following months were strangely calm. The students noticed the change in Bruce. He was quieter, more attentive. He didn't say much about what had happened, but everyone knew. Rico, the boy who had split the sandbag, was the first to ask. "Teacher, what do we do if they come back?" Bruce looked at him. "You don't do anything. Like this? Because if they come back, I'll be here. And this time, I won't hold back." Rico didn't understand. But one of the older students, a man named Elias who had spent years in prison, nodded slowly. "He's saying that the fight is no longer ours," said Elias. "It's his." Bruce didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. The end and the beginning. The gym closed a year later. Not for lack of students, not for lack of money. It closed because Bruce decided he had taught everything he could. The most dedicated students already had their own paths, some became coaches, others pursued careers away from violence, some even returned to finish their studies. On the last night, Bruce stood alone in the empty hall, looking at the scarred walls, the patched sandbags, the sign at the entrance. He thought about all the times he had entered a ring believing that victory was the only goal. He thought about how many times he had been defeated, even when he won. He took a key and left it on the table. It wasn't the same one that had thrown to Frazier. It was a new key, with no history. Someone would find her. Someone would need it. Outside, the city remained noisy, indifferent. Bruce took a deep breath, turned off the lights and left. He didn't look back.